Spring Boot REST Service Exception Handling Introduction. In real-world applications, errors are unavoidable. Examples: invalid input from user database failures, null values, business logic errors, external API failures. If exceptions are not handled properly, the API may return unclear error messages, expose sensitive details, crash unexpectedly, provide inconsistent responses. Spring Boot provides powerful mechanisms to handle exceptions in REST APIs in a clean and structured way. Understanding exception handling is essential for building robust and production-ready APIs. What does exception handling in REST service mean? Exception handling means catching errors and returning a controlled, meaningful response instead of letting the application crash. In simple terms, exception handling equals converting errors into proper API responses. Example concept: error occurs means exception caught, means custom response returned. Why this is important? Without exception handling, 500 internal server error, stack trace exposed, unclear message. With proper handling, error, user not found, status, 404. Benefits: better user experience, consistent API responses, improved debugging, secure error handling. Example concept: raw error means structured response, means better API default behavior in Spring Boot. If you don't handle exceptions, Spring Boot returns timestamp, period, 1, status, 500, error, internal server error, path/API/user. Example concept: unhandled exception means default error response method 1, using @exception handler, controller level. You can handle exceptions inside a controller. Example import org.springframework.web.bind.annotation. REST controller, @request mapping, API, public class user controller. Get mapping, :user, public string get user, throw new runtime exception, user not found. @exception handler, runtime exception.class, public string handle exception, runtime exception x, return x get message. Example concept: exception thrown means @exception handler catches, means response returned. Method 2, global exception handling using @controller advice. Best practice is to handle exceptions globally. Example import org.springframework.web.bind.annotation.co. Controller advice, public class global exception handler. @exception handler, runtime exception.class, public string handle runtime exception, runtime exception x, return error plus x.getMessage. Example concept: all controllers means one global handler, means centralized error handling. Method 3, returning custom response object. Instead of returning plain text, return structured JSON. Example response class, public class error response, private string message, private int status. Getters and setters. Handler @exception handler, runtime exception.class, public error response handle exception, runtime exception x. Error response error is new error response. Error.setMessage, exGetMessage, error.setStatus 500. Return error. Example concept: exception means custom object, means JSON response. Method 4, using @response status. You can define HTTP status for exceptions. Example: @response status, code equals HTTP status not found. Public class, user not found exception extends runtime exception. Public user not found exception, string message, super message. Usage. Usage is a measure of how something is used or utilized. It can refer to the frequency of use, ways something is applied, or the amount of consumption. Throw new user not found exception, user not found. Example concept: custom exception means mapped to HTTP status method 5 using ResponseEntity. You can control both body and status. Example: @exception handler, runtime exception class, public response entity error response, handle exception, runtime exception x. Error response error equals new error response. Error set message X. Error set status 500. Return new response entity. Error HTTP status internal server error. Example concept. Exception means response entity, means full control of response. Method 6. Handling multiple exceptions. At exception handler, illegal argument exception.class, null pointer exception.class. Public string handle multiple exceptions. Exception X. Return X.getMessage. Example concept. Multiple exception types means one handler. Method 7. Handling validation errors. When using @valid, validation exceptions occur. Example, @postmapping, parentheses, user, public string create user, @valid, @request body, user, return, user created. Handler import, org.springframework.web.bind.method argument not valid exception. @exception handler, method argument not valid exception.class. Public response entity string, handle validation, method argument not valid exception X. Return response entity.bad request.body, validation failed. Example concept. Validation error means captured, means meaningful response. Real world example. Controller @getMapping, user ID. Public string get user, path variable int ID. If ID equals 0, throw new illegal argument exception, invalid ID. Return user plus ID. Global handler, @controller advice, public class global exception handler. @exception handler, illegal argument exception.class, public response entity string handle bad request, exception X. Return response entity.bad request, body X get message. Example concept. Invalid input means exception, means global handler means 400 response. Common HTTP status codes. 400 means bad request. 401 means unauthorized. 403 means forbidden. 404 means not found. 500 means internal server error. Example concept. Exception type means appropriate HTTP status best practices. Best practices include use global exception handling, @controller advice, return consistent error format, avoid exposing stack traces, use custom exceptions, map correct HTTP status codes, log errors properly. Example concept. Centralized plus structured means clean API error handling. Common mistakes. 1. Returning raw exceptions. Bad. Stack trace exposed. 2. Using only runtime exception. Better to create custom exceptions. 3. No global handler. Leads to inconsistent responses. 4. Wrong HTTP status. Returning 200 for errors is incorrect. Advantages. Advantages include consistent API responses, improved user experience, easier debugging, better security, scalable error handling challenges. Challenges include handling many exception types, designing consistent error format, managing validation errors, avoiding overcomplexity. Concepts learned. By learning this topic, you understand what exception handling is, how Spring Boot handles errors by default, how to use @exception handler, how to use @controller advice, how to return structured responses, how to map HTTP status codes, how to handle validation errors. Simple definition. Spring Boot REST exception handling. The process of catching exceptions and returning structured, meaningful HTTP responses instead of default error messages. Final summary. Exception handling in Spring Boot REST services ensures that errors are handled gracefully and consistently. Spring Boot provides multiple ways to handle exceptions. @exception handler, controller level, @controller advice, global handling, @response status, status mapping, response entity, full control. The best approach is to use global exception handling with structured responses. This makes your APIs cleaner, more reliable, easier to maintain, production ready.